Julie. Are Commissioners Piscotti and Quesada joining us? On that, yeah, on the screen. Great. I call this November 15th, 2022 hybrid administrative meeting of Board of Finance to order. Board of Finance, first we'll move to number 2, approval of the minutes. I move to approve the August 23rd, 2022 Board of Finance meeting minutes. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Yes, Madam Chair. Commissioner Piscotti?
Aye.
Commissioner Quesada?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Malley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Benson?
Aye.
Madam Chair Barboa?
Aye. Thank you. Approval of minutes. Now we move to item number 3, presentation with Madam Treasurer to present.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board of Finance. It's good to see you again. And again, my name's Nancy Burse. I'm County Treasurer for Bernalillo County. And I'll go ahead and get started on my quarterly report ending September 30th, 2022. As you open that presentation, the second page is the agenda, and I'm going to go out of order just for one moment and go to some other office news as I have some staff behind me for specific shout outs. So I want to get that in and not make them so nervous and have to sit through a whole meeting. If you go to that slide, which is listed as page 28, I did want to announce that the Investment Committee community member came to an end of his term, Victor Ragosa, so he is no longer on the Investment Committee. And the new Investment Committee member that I'm proposing is Mike Athens, the president and CEO of the Rio Grande Credit Union, and he's been an outstanding partner for the county. He also has an MBA, comes from banking as far as commercial and government lending, and serves on several boards. And I think you'll find his experience very, very advantageous to be on the investment committee. Unfortunately, he's not here tonight. We'll get him back for another meeting, though. The other one is I have here Michael Gutierrez. He is our new principal accountant in the office, and so I wanted to introduce him. He has a master's and comes with many years of experience in state government as well as private sector. So we appreciate bringing that to the office. Also, I'd like to recognize a very special person, Pam Kling, who is the head of our delinquent department, and you hear me talk every single quarter about the millions of delinquent collections every quarter. This is her. She heads the department, and she's been with the county for roughly 18 years. We didn't get an exact quote on that, but we can. And she's retiring next month. So this will be her last Board of Finance meeting. And so I wanted you to see that face that works behind the scenes collecting. So thank you very much. Thank you, Pam. Okay.
Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez and Pam, for all your years of service. Thank you for joining the team, Mr. Gutierrez. Sorry I didn't catch your last name, but thank you for your service. I hope you taught. I've been always so amazed.
Actually, that's the other thing, is she married recently.
Oh.
So I'm using her old name, and maybe there's a new name I don't know about. Lucero.
Great. Thank you for your years of service, and I'm always impressed at how well we do with getting all those collections. So I hope you passed on some of your knowledge. Oh, great. Well, thank you all. team back there.
Raise your hand. They don't even want to raise their hand. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So as we go to page 1 of the presentation, you'll see, and also I see on the screen that our investment advisors have joined us virtually. So they're on the phone or some electronic wire somewhere. All right. So we first talk about property tax collections. Do I change the screen? Okay, I'm sorry. No, it's all right. And here you'll see the past 3 years of collections, with the last one being 2021. That is the last time you will see 2021 on a presentation, because we have the new 2022 that we've started. So as you look at 2021, you can see the collections that we had, 761, just a little bit over million for 2021. We still had about 15 million uncollected, but I know Pam has collected a little bit more since then. We're now collecting, as I said, for 2022. The bills were mailed October 30th, with the first half due December 10th, which just happens to be a Saturday. So the law provides for going to the next business day, so taxes are due Monday, December 12th. The next slide is about the percentage of tax collections that we have, and you can see there we average about 99%. And for 2021, we still have that outstanding amount, so we're almost at 98% property tax collections for 2021. Operationally, if you look at the next slide, we give you some overview on the call volume that we had for that quarter. And again, this is dated material ending September 30th. But you can see from the call volume on the top left, the July, August, and September, that we were much lower than the year before on our call volume. But again, remember, last year we had that tax delay. Lots of things were going on then. So that's to be expected, that things come back to normal. The delinquent turnover to the state, again, that's an annual number, so you saw that before. 517 properties were turned over to the state this year. If you look at our delinquent collections, we break out for you that mobile home, MH, personal property or business equipment, PP, and RP, the real property. And we compare that month from the past year. And if you just look at, again, this one quarter, that was almost $11 million that was collected in those 3 months throughout those different categories. So again, thank you, Pam and team.
Now look at this chart.
Look at the numbers.
So the property tax distribution, of course, you know I collect, but then I don't get to keep it all. I send it out to those taxing entities. Not much has changed at all in those percentages. With education being the highest amount, 34% of the taxes are given back to APS, the public charter schools, C&M, and then we fall right behind that at 22%. And then the cities and villages at 21%, UNM Hospital, the health component, 15% of our taxes go there. And then the environment, 4%, which includes the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, as well as the East Edgewood Soil and Water Conservancy District. Thank you, Ryan. And then another 4% go to the state for the bonds that you might have seen on the election vote that we had recently. So that's where some of our tax money goes to, is for those bonds. Next, I'm going to step aside and let my deputy, Mr. Ryan Travelstead, talk to you about some bank balances and collateral. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Ryan Travelstead, Deputy Treasurer here in the Treasurer's Office. I'll go through the bank balances and collateral as of September 30th, as well as some of the investment holdings of the portfolio, and then transition that over to Rashad Masri with the county's investment advisor, GPA, to talk about some strategy recommendations that they might have. So to get started here, bank balances, nothing of note here. All of the balances as of September 30th were fully collateralized, so no risk, no exposure there. Quick economic update is Rashad and the GPA team will probably echo this, but there's a lot of still a lot of mixed signals. Yeah, GDP contracted for the first 2 quarters, but then quarter 3 it was up a little bit. Mortgage rates, that's a really big watch item because they're now at 7%, and kind of seeing what that might impact on the housing market and how that might impact other sections of the economy. Additional items are persistent inflation, and then as the Federal Reserve continues to raise rates to try to get a hold of that inflation, there's kind of general consensus in some of the articles that I've been reading that say that there's an outlook for a shallow recession in 2023. So kind of keeping our eyes ahead there. Yeah, a lot of mixed signals that we're not quite sure how to interpret, and even if we knew exactly how to interpret it, we can't predict the future. So it's all just things to kind of consider. Again, we'll go through this. This is the same as the previous quarters. The portfolio structure, we have it separated into 4 buckets. We have our, let me go back actually. So we have our operating funds that's composed of our highly liquid bucket and the liquid bucket. We have our core bucket and then the bond proceeds bucket. And this next slide here will demonstrate how those buckets play into our bank balances. So again, we have inflows that come into the bank, and at the same time we have outflows. Those inflows and outflows don't always line up with each other. As inflows come in, they may stay for 30 or 45 days and then be distributed out. Some of that might be money that we retain as reserve balances, and so that's money that we can invest for a little bit longer. So this slide here kind of depicts that. So if we see that we have additional liquidity in the bank account, we will transfer that down to either the highly liquid or the liquid bucket. And then those longer balances that we're not anticipated to send out, we'll send those over to the core bucket to invest those a little bit longer and pick up a little bit more yield. And then finally, the red bond proceeds bucket there, that's essentially when the county sells bonds to fund projects. There's a time delay from when we receive the funds to when contractors pave roads and buildings get constructed, and so we invest that money for that time period and earn some interest. So those investments are matched to the anticipated expenditure schedule for those capital projects. So the next slide is kind of a high-level summary of the balances of each of the portfolio and the composition of each. So you can see there the bank balance, we had around $28 million. The highly liquid, we had around $128 million. Liquid 210, roughly. The core was 280, and the bond proceeds was 32 million. And this next slide will demonstrate kind of some of the policy changes that the board approved the last meeting, and how we've enacted those changes. So if you can see here in this slide on the far left column, the September 2021, these are the percentages of the total. And then you see in the middle, that's June of 2022, and same with September of 2022. And what I'd like to note here is in September of 2021, the thing there that jumps out to me is that highly liquid balance of 39%. So that bucket made up 39% of the total cash the county had. And so that highly liquid bucket is invested really short term, less than 30 days. So it's going to be more reactive to interest rate swings. And so what we've slowly done with the help of GPA and some strategy discussions is over the last year, we've brought that down to around 18% while increasing the size of the core and the liquid portfolios from around 23% for the liquid to 30%. And the core from 24% roughly to 41%. So essentially what that's going to do is it allow us to better anticipate our investment income earnings, so then that in turn the budget department can have a little bit more stable projections on what we will will be earning an investment income rather than kind of being a little bit more volatile with the changes in interest rates. The next slide here will detail the breakout of the highly liquid bucket. So as we see here, we have around 24 million in the money market and a money market account, 99 million in the local government investment pool, little less than 10,000 in the Bank of the West account, and 5 million in our main bank account. And all of that matures less than 30 days. We can transition to the liquid, and here we have the around 16 million in the money market, and then you can see the maturity breakout by type. So the we have this portfolio is made up of predominantly treasury securities, have around $10 million in commercial paper, and then around almost 11 million in agency securities. And then we'll jump into the same detail here with the core portfolio. And you can see this portfolio is structured out a little bit farther than the other two, which is by design. Again, predominantly in U.S. Treasuries with some agency exposure as well in there. And then finally, the bond proceeds detail. Again, this portfolio is managed to anticipated draws, so that's where you see there's a 24 million that will mature in 30 days to a year, and that's just kind of anticipated when the contractors will be, submitting invoices to be paid. And then this is a graphical representation of those same, the preceding 4 slides. Shows that not all of our money is invested out to 5 years. We actually have $245 million that will mature within the year to show that this is we have sufficient liquidity to meet bills as they come due. And then this slide is welcome sign, welcome change. So with the Federal Reserve began to raise interest rates, I believe it was in March of this year, and they started to ramp those up a little bit more aggressively in June. And so we're starting to feel the impacts of those rate rises with increased investment income. So if you notice here in the first quarter of 2023, they had around $1.7 million of investment income. And one other caveat that I want to call out here is that in fiscal year 21 and 22, those numbers in the fourth quarter, we would recognize the discount and premium associated with those investments only once per year. We realize that while it's an acceptable accounting method, it's maybe not the best to compare against previous quarters. So what we've done in 2023 going forward, we've now recognized the discount and premium each month. So that'll give us a better comparison to see if we're on track to meet budget. And so that is one thing I wanted to draw attention to there. And with that, I can stand for questions, or if you would like, I can turn it over to GPA, and they can talk through their investment strategy recommendations. All right, thank you, Rashad. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. Take it away.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the Board of Finance, and thank you, Madam Treasurer and Deputy Treasurer, for allowing us to be in front of you today. So bear with me while I share my screen. All right, well, let me jump right into it. I think I'd like to start first with just piggybacking off of what Ryan was talking about in terms of the markets. We are in a period of unprecedented uncertainty, I will say. We're in a yield environment that we haven't seen in over 15 years, close to 20 years at this point, and that really traverses any nuance to yield that you want to think about, whether it's Fed funds rate, whether it's the Treasury yield curve, or whether it's mortgage rates. Right now, we have a severely inverted yield curve where 3-month Treasury rates are higher than 30-year Treasury rates. So we are in a time of uncertainty. It really kind of goes back to creating and implementing and maintaining a very disciplined portfolio strategy, which I believe the county has done, and that we're going to go over with you all today in terms of our recommendations. And I am not going to cover any of the portfolio details that Deputy Treasurer already covered to spare you some time. We just had some summary detail that was already covered previously. I want to start here with our compliance report that we actually publish monthly. So this is a compliance report that reflects the county's investment policy. And I did want to show it for this round with the Board of Finance because last meeting we did approve updates to the investment policy, which are reflected here. And so both the county and GPA are diligently, almost on a daily basis, looking at compliance. We certainly are on our side to make sure that we're adhering well inside of the investment policy. And from a diversification perspective, the county is within policy, managing to the specific issuer concentrations and asset class concentrations across the portfolio. And then we also have prudent and reasonable constraints when it comes to the maturity structure to appropriately manage liquidity for the county while also managing a longer term core investment portfolio. So we look at breakpoints of maturities for the total portfolio under 30 days, under 1 year, under 5 years. And the county is well within compliance over those minimum bands. So the portfolio is in really good shape, certainly from a compliance perspective. And now let's kind of talk about our recommendations for going forward and review just a bit where the portfolio is at. And I'm actually going to jump to a graphical representation of the existing strategy because I think it tells a better story here. You heard this a moment ago. We've certainly come a long way since going back to the beginning of the calendar year, but certainly over the last several months, just implementing that disciplined approach to our portfolio strategy. And it's really about the 4 components that you see here working together in an optimal way. And that is the highly liquid, which you can think of as your pool, the state pool and bank account, the bond proceeds, which, we're matching expenses as needed, and then our liquidity ladder, which is going to match operating expenses, and then our operating core, which is our longer term core investment portfolio. And you can see the graph on the top right there. We've incrementally and with a disciplined approach added to the core portfolio from the highly liquid portfolio over the course of the last several quarters. And we're really in a state right now where we think the portfolio is very well positioned to sustain the uncertainty that we see in this market. We're not developing portfolio strategy to chase particular yield or take advantage of short-term opportunities. We're really taking a foundational approach to how can we get these buckets working together effectively to more than satisfy in a conservative way the cash needs of the county, but while also taking advantage of investment return where appropriate in the core portfolio. And we've really gotten these buckets working together well. We've added with the approvals from the Board of Finance in previous meetings, we've added $135 million to the core portfolio at yields of well above 3%. And then we've funded the liquidity laddered portfolio over the last quarter at about $140 million with yields averaging around 4%. And what we're doing there is matching known operating expenses. So we're really happy with where the portfolio is right now, given the recommendations and implementation that we've done over the last quarter. Now, if I move forward, I just have a very brief slide on each of the portfolio components and our recommendations. And please stop me if you have any questions, and we'll certainly stop at the end with any questions. Starting with the core investment portfolio, this is just a portion of the portfolio outside of your highly liquid and the laddered liquidity portfolio and outside of the bond proceeds. Our recommendation is to maintain managing to the 0 to 5 all treasury benchmark. What you can see in the table there is the target portfolio is the 0 to 5 year treasury benchmark broken out by maturity buckets. So the percent of the portfolio that's under 1 year, between 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 4 to 5. And then your current portfolio. The duration is pretty much on target. We're managing to that 0 to 5 year duration, and also recommend to manage to pretty much a duration neutral point with that 0 to 5 year treasury and a very well laddered maturity cadence, which you can see there. So always you're going to have 25 about 25% of the portfolio that's going to be maturing under 1 year. We not only like the laddered approach from a duration management perspective, but also as a secondary tier of liquidity should that need arise. So we're going to recommend maintaining the 0 to 5 year all treasury benchmark. And then when it comes to diversification, we do look at optimal strategic asset allocation targets. And what we've determined for the county is the strategic allocation is in the pie chart on the far right. And that reflects 50% in agency securities, 40% in treasuries, and 10% in munis. And what that means is just a target for us over time where as we see market opportunities over time, we'd like to get to the allocation on the right. The county's current allocation is the pie chart there in the middle where we have an overweight to treasuries, about 83%. This is very common across a lot of our entities right now. The very long story short is with the uncertainty and kind of the tumultuous 2022 that we've had, treasuries are the safest asset in the world, and we've seen yields that we haven't seen in 20 years. And so it made a lot of sense to overweight portfolios in treasuries, certainly within our tactical bands. And I would imagine over the course of the next year, as things may normalize in the agency market and certainly in the treasury market, we might see that allocation of agencies increase. But we are recommending to maintain the strategic asset allocation target, which is reflected there on the far right. And then the last point here in the core portfolio will just be, as we go into year end and as we look to the next Board of Finance meeting, we'll be evaluating if there's any additional funds that we need to move to the core portfolio. We don't have a recommendation to do that as of now.
Rashad, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
On this slide, just curious, I know we've discussed this, but would it perchance be, while the yield curve is inverted, be flexing a little bit with shorter term durations? The laddered portfolio definitely makes sense in a traditional yield curve, but once it's inverted like it is now with, 3 months being so high, would it be possible to keep new money going in at short term, and then once the curve corrects, then start using that short term maturity and deploy it back into the longer term?
So we actually like to be more duration neutral and even a bit long as of now. And the reason I say that is more of a market timing perspective, where when we see an inverted yield curve, that's really telling us that both the Fed and the market is telling us that those yields are not going to stay there very long, because we know we're going to normalize and we're going to transition back to a positively sloping yield curve. And so right now, especially in a 0 to 5 year strategy, we really like locking in those 3 to 5 year rates, even though they might be slightly lower than the 12-month point, which is actually the peak of the entire yield curve right now. So we're certainly anchoring in that 0 to 1 year and 1 to 2 year range to take advantage of these yields, but we're actually distributing it pretty evenly across that 0 to 5 year, because we want to make sure we lock in those yields. And we really think that, even if as of today, we might be quote unquote losing a few basis points going out to the 3 to 5 year space, we think that the county strategy is a buy and hold, and we want to set up something that's extremely stable and go ahead and lock in that income that's well over 4%. The other thing is with the cash match portfolio, the liquidity laddered portfolio, that is only out 12 months. And so we did deploy the $140 million that we did deploy from highly liquid to the laddered liquidity. The byproduct of that approach was being able to take advantage of the very peak of the yield curve.
Okay, thank you.
Just looking to you, Madam Treasurer, if there's anything. No. Okay. Any other questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Rashad.
Of course.
We were.
As we look, Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Rashad. I'll just jump in for a minute. And we talked about that at the investment committee, and we've talked about that during this time, which is probably, the 3 to 6 months where we're moving this strategy of getting all the buckets to work together. We were really just going to start that movement and then look at analyzing how that worked. And that did not take into account chasing yields or inverted curves, because we wanted to build in that stability and that strategy and be very solid with that. And then look at, okay, now that we've done it, and let's take into account how the markets moved and what the Fed did, was this the right move? Notwithstanding yields,
Sure.
but is this the right strategy moving forward? So, yeah, we might have lost a couple points, but as we said, we do have the highly liquid bucket, as I call it, and that certainly is getting those yields. So, but appreciate the discussion because it's an unusual time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we want to go, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? And then we go, but where do we really want to fall? Where do we really want to be for the county?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
And I think, too, just to add one more additional piece of color there, is we've had this debate internally almost every day. And, we're talking to, our research group and our chief investment officer, just trying to kind of understand what's the right reaction to the markets and how are we going to, best set up these portfolios for the future. And, a comment was made around, the short-term rates. Are you looking to rent bonds or buy bonds, right? And a lot of the way that we look at the portfolio for the county especially is buy and hold, establish that foundation for multiple years of kind of compounding returns and making sure that we can sustain business cycles and sustain interest rate cycles. And when we look at that, as we look at, how do we want to maintain duration as it pertains to the benchmark and how do we want to be laddered, our analysis always went back to maintaining that laddered cadence and really taking advantage of the 3 to 5 year part of that curve to lock in yield that you're going to own out 4 to 5 years.
And Rashad, I might just add one final piece is that right now we're also in the middle of tax collection cycle. And so at the end of the tax collection cycle, we'll have the portion that the county retains. And so since we have this strategy in place, that will allow us to build up the the laddered liquidity portfolio at that year plus range. So those investments that we'll make with the property tax proceeds will be taken advantage of that, because we have this strategy in place.
Looking at the liquidity laddered portfolio, our recommendations here were established really in our previous meeting and is continuing to be our recommendation. So we've funded the liquidity laddered portfolio to match the known operating expenses for payroll and debt service that's going out a year. And our strategy is to allow those maturities to go to cash to fund those expenses. And any sort of reinvestment in excess cash or as the county's cash flows might have changed would only be reinvested as directed. Right now, the strategy is to allow those maturities to go to cash to fund those operating expenses. And the bond, in terms of the bond proceeds, we are reinvesting excess cash to dedicated maturities as directed. Those cash flows have been scheduled out to try to match known draws and known expenses, and to the extent reinvestment only occurs if there is excess cash due to changes in cash flow schedules, and those are only reinvested as directed. And this is a summary of each of the portfolios within, each of the operating portfolio components. And this is just insight into how we think about the strategy and how we're managing the target amounts in the portfolios and the minimum max ranges that we put as guardrails. So I'm actually going to skip to the next slide just to give you a summary of the recommendations. Again, we really like where the portfolio is at. We really like the structure and the foundation that's been built for moving forward into the end of the calendar year and into next year. And so our recommendations for, as a summary, in the core portfolio is to maintain the existing benchmark, the 0 to 5 year treasury, and maintain the existing diversification strategy around the strategic asset allocation. And then we just, talked about the bond proceeds and laddered liquidity being set up to match expenses, and any reinvestment of excess cash would only be executed as directed, as some of those cash flows would be illuminated over time. Thank you very much for the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Rashad. Yes, Madam Treasurer.
Great. And I think we go to questions and discussion, but I think we had those as we went along, and that's great. It's sometimes best to do it then and not wait to the end. So we're flexible on that. Also in your packet are our key performance metrics. Those are available on our transparency portal that we have for operations. And again, your tax maintenance report that shows that quarter, and particularly on the second page of that report where it shows how much went to the top entities. So when constituents are asking about that, you'll have that every quarter. And if you need it more frequently, definitely give me a call. We have it monthly. Otherwise, I think we've covered everything in amazingly good time. Yay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions from Commission?
Oh, thank you.
I just want to thank you all for your leadership, always for briefing with me and getting me up to date ahead of time as well. And just, thank you, Madam Treasurer, for your leadership, and Deputy Treasurer for your work on this. I'm always very impressed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move to item 4, advice and consent. So motion to give advice and consent to the proposed quarterly investment strategy. We need to hear from Madam Treasurer.
I think we reviewed that with GPA and Rashad. We're pretty much staying the course. We've moved that money, as we've said, so we want to be able to quantify that move and see how it settles out with the economy that we're in right now, and come back with you. I think it's going to be in February around Valentine's Day. That's always a great time.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Benson. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Piscotti.
Aye.
Commissioner Quesada.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Malley.
Yes.
Vice Chair Benson.
Aye.
Madam Chair Barboa.
Aye. Thank you. Have a do pass. And announcement of the next Board of Finance meeting, Tuesday, February 23rd, 4 p.m. here in Ken Sanchez Chambers. If there's no other business, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer, Deputy.